Digging a grave is very hard work. Every muscle in the person's body screams in pain, especially behind the shoulder blade. The ground is frozen, and frost covers the earth, but the person is sweating so much that the coat had to be taken off. Their hands are raw with blisters because they do not have proper gloves to hold the shovel. They are alone in the woods with a body that needs to be buried. The hole is only about 2 feet deep, but it looks like a dark, endless pit. The person knows it is not deep enough and keeps digging. They have to stand inside the hole now, and it feels wrong, like standing in a grave meant for themselves. Suddenly, a branch snaps in the distance. The person freezes and listens, imagining police, sirens, and prison. They quietly call out hello, but there is no answer. Another sound comes closer, and fear rises until a squirrel runs into the moonlight. The woods fall silent again. The danger is gone, but there is no time to rest. The sun will rise soon, and the body must be buried before morning. 3 months earlier, life looks very different for Eve Bennett. People often say she is lucky because she has a house, a job, and nice shoes, but they are really talking about her husband, Nate Bennett. That morning, on the first day of school, Nate hums the same Elvis song while brushing his teeth, just as he always does. Eve finds the sound and his mouthwash unpleasant, but she says nothing. Their life follows a strict routine, with 3 short kisses each day and a fixed schedule for intimacy. Nate looks strong and confident, while Eve sees herself as plain and thin. She puts on expensive shoes and lies when Nate asks if they are new because she wants to avoid a problem. Nate does not argue. They both work at Caseham High School, so they leave together. As they drive, Eve thinks about her life and quietly wishes that a truck would crash into them and end everything. At the same time, a girl sits in her mother's car, afraid to go into the school. She feels like she would do anything to stay inside the car. Her mother tells her that no one will remember what happened last year, but the girl knows that is not true. When she finally steps out, she wears plain clothes to avoid attention, yet she still feels everyone looking at her and whispering. Near the entrance, she sees Kenzie Montgomery sitting with her group of friends. With her is Hudson Jankowski, who used to be her best friend but now avoids her. Kenzie blocks the path by throwing her backpack down and watches as the girl tries to pass. The others laugh, and the girl gives up and walks away to find another entrance because she knows things can always get worse. Inside the school, Eve sits in the teacher's lounge with Shelby. They talk about a teacher named Art Tuttle. He was kind and respected, but he had to leave after a serious problem. Eve believes he did nothing wrong, while Shelby is unsure. Eve explains that the student involved is Addie Severson, and that she is now in her class. Shelby warns her to be careful and says the girl is troubled. Eve feels uneasy hearing this. Later, at lunch, Addie walks through the cafeteria holding her tray, not knowing where to sit. Other students avoid her. She sees Hudson sitting with Kenzie, looking like he belongs there, far away from her. A girl named Ella Curtis calls her over, and Addie sits with her, hoping it might be okay. However, Ella quickly shows that she only wants gossip. She asks what it was like to be with Art and calls it disgusting. Addie says nothing happened, but Ella does not believe her. Realizing this, Addie stands up and leaves her food behind. As she walks away, she notices Hudson watching her for a moment before looking away again. At the same time, Eve sits in the staff cafeteria and watches Nate from a distance. A young new teacher is standing close to him and touches his arm, which makes Eve feel jealous. Shelby tries to calm her, but the feeling does not go away. When lunch ends, Eve walks over to Nate, grabs his tie, and kisses him in a strong and clear way so the other woman can see. Nate looks surprised but does not stop her. After that, Eve goes to her classroom, where a student named Jasmine Owens asks for a letter and says Eve inspired her to become a teacher. This makes Eve feel better for a moment. Then she sees the name Addie Severson on her list and finally meets the girl. Addie looks very ordinary, but Eve cannot forget what happened to Art, and she feels resentment. What worries Eve even more is that Addie is also in Nate's class. In the last class of the day, Addie enters English with Mr. Bennett. He allows students to sit anywhere, so she chooses a seat by the window. Soon after, Kenzie forces her to move, and Addie ends up sitting in the front row. From there, she notices that he is very handsome and comfortable in class. He begins by asking students to share their favorite poems. When he calls her Adeline, she asks to be called Addie and says her favorite poem is Annabel Lee. He is impressed and speaks about the poem and other names like it. Then he looks at her, and as the moment passes, Nate gives Addie a small wink, and she feels a sudden surge of joy. After that moment in class, life moves on, but the feeling stays with Addie. Later that day, Nate stays at school as usual, working on the newspaper and the poetry magazine. Eve goes home early with Shelby because they came in his car that morning. When Eve gets home, it is still early, and there is nothing to do. There are no papers to grade yet, and it is too early for her usual glass of wine. She feels restless and unsure of what to do, so she takes her car and drives without a plan. She ends up at the mall. The place is full of teenagers, and she notices how uncomfortable she feels seeing her own students outside of school. She sits in her car for a moment and tries to calm herself. She thinks about Nate and how he would not feel this way at all. Then she steps out and walks inside, holding her large blue purse. She passes the smell of warm snacks and sweets but ignores them. She goes straight to a shoe store and looks at a pair of expensive heels in the window. Inside, the store is quiet, and the worker is not paying attention. Eve finds the shoes in her size and tries them on. They fit perfectly, and she feels a rush of excitement. For a moment, she feels confident and beautiful. Then she sees the price and knows she should not buy them. She thinks about Nate and how he would react, and the feeling fades into disappointment. As she looks around, she notices the worker is busy with another customer. Without thinking too much, she slips the shoes into her purse. Her hands shake, but she tells herself she will not get caught. She walks toward the exit, following another woman, feeling both fear and excitement. Just as she reaches the door, a loud alarm fills the store. Panic hits her instantly, and she is sure she has been caught. Her heart races as a guard moves toward the entrance. Then she realizes the alarm was triggered by the other customer, not her. The worker apologizes and leads the woman back inside. Eve stands there, shaking, and understands how close she came to being caught. She quickly takes the shoes out of her bag and puts them back before leaving. When she drives home, her body is still full of nervous energy. She feels ashamed but also relieved. When she walks inside, she smells food cooking and finds Nate in the kitchen making dinner. She feels grateful that nothing went wrong and that she does not have to explain anything. She calls him the best husband and feels a sudden need to be close to him. She wraps her arms around him and kisses his neck, trying to start something more. Nate gently pulls away and laughs, saying he is too hungry and wants to eat first. Eve tries to push a little more, asking for later, but Nate gives excuses and laughs again in a way that does not feel real. She understands what will happen and feels the quiet sting of rejection. At the same time, Addie is on the bus heading home. She notices that most of the older students are not there because they have cars. She thinks about Hudson and how he once said he would drive her to school every day. Now he does not even speak to her. When she gets home, her mother is already waiting and asking questions. Addie answers with sarcasm and short replies. Her mother asks about Hudson and even offers to call his family, but Addie quickly refuses. There are things her mother does not know and can never know. When her mother asks about Mr. Tuttle, Addie says he is gone. She sees the relief on her mother's face and feels frustrated because she knows her mother never fully believed her. 2 weeks later, things at school have not improved. In the locker room after gym class, Addie tries to stay unnoticed, but Kenzie points at her legs and mocks her for not shaving. The other girls laugh, and Addie feels exposed and ashamed. She rushes through her shower and leaves as fast as she can. English class is the only place where she feels calm. Nate greets the class with a smile and begins returning their poem assignments. He jokes about one student named Austin Vargas, who did not take the task seriously. When he reaches Addie, he places her paper face down and tells her to see him after class. The words make her feel sick with worry. She sits through the rest of the lesson in silence, thinking about everything that could go wrong. When the class ends, she walks up to his desk slowly. Nate calls her name, and she asks what is wrong with her work. Instead of criticizing her, he tells her that her poem is amazing. He talks about her words and says her writing is powerful, calling it a masterpiece. Addie feels a sudden rush of happiness that she has not felt in a long time. He tells her he wants her to publish the poem in the school magazine, and invites her to join the group. She hesitates at first, unsure of herself, but his steady and focused gaze makes her feel seen. Despite her doubts, she agrees to try. Later, Eve is at the grocery store when she runs into Art Tuttle. He looks very different from before, tired and worn down. His clothes do not fit well, and there is a strange smell on him. They talk briefly, and he tells her how much he misses the school and how hard things have been. Eve feels uncomfortable but tries to be polite. When she mentions that Addie is now in her class, Art reacts strongly. Suddenly, he grabs her arm tightly, and his voice changes as he leans close. He warns her that she needs to be very careful around Addie and says the girl is not what she seems. His grip is firm and frightening, and Eve feels a moment of real fear. After a while, his anger fades, and he lets go. Eve drives him home, where his wife Marcia meets them at the door. It is clear that their life has changed in a painful way. As Eve leaves, she thinks about what Art said, but she does not fully believe it. She tells herself that she will simply treat Addie like any other student and not get involved any further. After everything that has already happened, Addie keeps going through each day alone. At lunch, she sits by herself again and tries to focus on her trigonometry book, but the work feels too hard without help. Soon, Kenzie Montgomery walks over with her friends and demands that Addie leave the table. Addie tries to stay calm and says they can share the space, but Kenzie pushes her tray, spilling her drink, while Bella grabs her book. Hudson Jankowski steps in for a moment and questions what is going on, but he does not truly defend her. Addie realizes he is not on her side anymore. She takes her book back and walks away, holding herself together as best as she can. Later, Addie sees Hudson and Kenzie alone together in a quiet area. They stand close, almost like they are about to kiss. Addie looks away, but then notices Kenzie's bag and the keys hanging from it. Without thinking too much, she takes the keys and slips them into her pocket before walking away. When she reaches the poetry meeting, she still feels the weight of them in her hand, and for a moment, it gives her a strange sense of control. Inside the meeting, Nate Bennett greets her with clear excitement. He introduces her to the editor, a girl who calls herself Lotus, though her real name is Mary. Lotus reads Addie's poem and says it is dark, then quickly brings up the rumor about Art Tuttle. Addie tries to explain, but Lotus does not believe her. The moment feels heavy, but when Addie looks up, Nate gives her an encouraging gesture that makes her stay. She feels a mix of doubt and strength, holding on to the idea that she might belong here. That same evening, Eve Bennett is living a very different life. She goes to a shoe store again, but this time she is not alone in the same way. A man named Jay helps her try on shoes, and his attention makes her feel noticed in a way she has not felt in a long time. The store closes, and the space becomes quiet. The moment between them grows closer, filled with tension and need. They move into a small back room, and everything becomes soft and distant around them. The closeness gives Eve a feeling she has been missing, something warm and real. After that, they lie still for a moment, both quiet, as if the world outside does not exist. Then Jay's phone rings, and the spell breaks. A woman's voice is on the other end, and Jay quickly lies about being at work. Eve listens, reminded that this is not a simple life. Still, when he asks to see her again, she agrees without hesitation, knowing this connection has become important to her. Back at school, Addie stays after another meeting when Nate asks her to talk. He tells her about a poetry competition and says he has chosen her work to represent the school. Addie is shocked and unsure if she deserves it, but Nate speaks with confidence and tells her she is talented. He explains that his wife, Eve, is more serious and strict, while he and Addie understand a more creative way of thinking. The words make Addie feel seen, even special. When the meeting ends, she steps into the hallway where Lotus is waiting. Lotus reacts with anger, saying Addie does not deserve the spot and accusing her of getting close to teachers again. The words hurt, and Addie begins to wonder if Nate's choice means more than just her writing. At the same time, the idea that she might be important to him sends a strange feeling through her. Meanwhile, Eve faces her own reality. On her 30th birthday, she feels the weight of time and the quiet fear of what her life has become. She wears a pair of expensive shoes she has hidden from Nate and tries once again to reach him. Standing close, she suggests something personal as a birthday gift, but Nate refuses in a calm and distant way. He speaks about time and routine, offering dinner later instead. Eve feels the rejection deeply but hides it behind a simple response. Later, she receives a secret message from Jay, wishing her a happy birthday and asking to see her. The message brings a small moment of real happiness that she does not feel with her husband anymore. The next day, Addie faces another difficult moment. After gym class, her clothes are taken, and she finds them soaked and useless. She has no choice but to wear her sweaty gym clothes to class. When she enters trigonometry late, Eve looks at her with clear disapproval. Addie tries to hand in her homework, but it is ruined from the water. Eve throws it away without hesitation and tells her to redo it. The moment is cold and sharp, leaving Addie feeling small once again. As she sits there, listening to the lesson, she cannot help but think about how harsh Eve seems. In that moment, Addie feels something unexpected, a quiet sense of pity for Nate, believing that he must suffer being married to someone like her. After the long and painful day in class, Addie continues to feel the weight of everything on her body. Her gym clothes have dried into a stiff and uncomfortable layer, and she can smell herself as she walks through the halls. Other students notice too, and their faces show it. Some step away from her, and others whisper. The shame follows her with every step. Before her last class, she goes into the bathroom and tries to fix the problem. She uses the sink to squeeze water out of her wet jeans and sweatshirt, but it does not help much. The clothes stay heavy and damp, and her shirt only gets wetter. She gives up and rushes to English. At the door, Nate looks at her and immediately sees something is wrong. Addie feels her face burn with embarrassment as he takes in her messy state. He asks if she is okay, and she gives a short answer, hoping he will stop asking. Instead, he writes a note and hands it to her quietly. He tells her to go home and rest, saying she looks like she needs it. Addie feels relief wash over her. She thanks him, and when he gives her a small wink, her heart lifts again. She leaves the school quickly and rides her bike away. As she rides, she remembers the keys in her pocket and changes direction. She heads toward Kenzie's house instead of going home. When she reaches it, she sees how large and perfect it looks. The house is quiet, and the windows are dark. She takes out the keys and thinks about using them, but the risk feels too high. She puts them away and leaves. When she gets home, her mother is waiting. They argue about visiting her father's grave, but Addie refuses. She speaks openly about her father's drinking and anger, saying he does not deserve her time. Her mother finally gives in and suggests they go out for dinner instead. That same night, Eve prepares for her birthday dinner. She dresses nicely and hopes the night will feel different, but Nate shows little interest. He chooses a simple restaurant instead of something special. The drive is quiet, and the silence between them feels heavy. When they arrive, Eve tries to enjoy the moment, but Nate's focus drifts to something else. He notices Addie sitting with her mother across the room. He speaks about her talent and her love for poetry, and Eve feels uneasy. She warns him to be careful, remembering what happened before with another teacher. Nate reacts with clear anger and dismisses her concern. At the same time, Addie cannot stop watching Nate. She notices everything about him, from the way he sits to how he reacts to others. She also sees the distance between him and Eve. They barely speak, and the silence between them is clear. Addie compares this to the way Nate treated her earlier, with kindness and attention. She feels a mix of emotions as she watches them. When her mother gets ready to leave, Addie says she needs to use the bathroom and walks away. In the hallway, Nate meets her by chance. He asks if she is feeling better after the day she had. Addie explains what happened in the locker room, but she does not name anyone. Nate becomes upset and wants to know who did it, but she refuses. Then he gives her a new task. He tells her to write a letter to the person who hurt her, a letter full of anger where she can say anything she wants. The idea stays with her, especially as she thinks about the keys still in her pocket. Before they part, she asks if he is enjoying his evening, and he answers in a flat way, making it clear that he is not happy. Later that night, Eve returns home with Nate. He quickly excuses himself, pretending to be tired, and goes upstairs. Eve knows what this means and does not try to stop him. When she is alone, she hears a sound at the door and finds a box waiting outside. Inside are red shoes from Jay. The gift touches her deeply, and she feels tears in her eyes. She sends him a message to thank him, wishing he were there. When she opens the door again, hoping to see him, no one is there. The night feels empty again. The next day at school, Addie faces something worse. When she opens her locker, it is filled with shaving cream. Her books and clothes are covered, and students gather to laugh. Kenzie and Bella stand nearby, making jokes. Addie feels trapped in the moment but does not react. Then Eve arrives and asks what is going on. Instead of helping, she tells Addie to clean it up herself. The lack of support hurts, but Addie stays silent and starts cleaning. Hudson arrives and sees the mess. For the first time in a long while, he steps forward and offers to help her. Kenzie tries to stop him, but he does not listen at first. Addie sees the danger in this and tells him to leave, knowing it will only make things worse. He hesitates but finally walks away, giving her one last look filled with sadness. As she watches him go, Addie feels the weight of everything between them. She knows that what happened in the past cannot be changed, and the truth about Hudson's role in her father's death will always stand between them. After the hallway clears, Addie stays behind and begins to clean her locker. She uses paper towels to wipe away the thick shaving cream, working slowly and alone. Her books are damp, but she saves what she can and places them on the floor. As she works, she keeps thinking about Hudson. He had offered to help her, and for a moment it felt like things might go back to the way they used to be. But she had pushed him away because she knew Kenzie would make things worse. As she scrubs, her thoughts drift back to the night everything changed. Hudson had been at her house, and they were studying in her room. Her father came home drunk and angry, like he often did. When he found them together, he started shouting and accusing them of things that were not true. The argument moved into the hallway, and the tension grew worse. Then her father pushed Hudson. Before Hudson could react, Addie shoved her father back. He lost his balance and fell down the stairs. When they reached the bottom, he was lying still, his neck bent in a way that looked wrong. Hudson wanted to call for help, but Addie stopped him. She told him they had to leave. They ran out of the house and kept the truth hidden. The death was called an accident, but the secret stayed with them. After that night, Hudson began to pull away, and Addie was left alone. The rain starts outside as Addie finishes cleaning. She looks at the empty hallway and feels tired. Then Nate appears and asks what she is doing. She tells him about the locker, and he immediately offers to help. Together they finish the last parts, and he helps her arrange her books so they can dry. When they are done, he offers her a ride home because of the rain. Addie hesitates at first, remembering what happened to another teacher before, but Nate tells her it is not a problem. She agrees and follows him outside. They walk under his umbrella and reach his car. Inside, Addie notices the clean space and the smell of his cologne. It feels different from school, more private. As they drive, the conversation becomes easy. Nate talks about school and about how hard it can be, and Addie feels understood. For a moment, she lets herself imagine something impossible, like they belong in the same world. When they reach her house, she feels a strange disappointment that the ride is over. She thanks him and runs inside, smiling despite everything. The next big moment comes with the math test. Addie sits at her desk and tries to focus, but the questions make no sense to her. Panic grows as she realizes she might fail. Then she notices Kyle Lewis sitting in front of her. His answers are clear, and without thinking too much, she starts copying them. She tells herself it is only this once. When the test ends, she feels relief, but it does not last long. Kenzie stops her in the hallway and tells her she saw everything. Addie feels fear rise again as Kenzie gives her a choice. If Addie wants her silence, she must do something humiliating in front of the class. The demand shocks her, and she refuses. Kenzie walks away, leaving Addie alone with the fear of what will happen next. Addie begins to wonder if the secret about her father might come out too, and the thought makes everything feel worse. At the same time, things shift in the Bennett house. When Eve comes home, Nate is already there. He acts different, more warm and close than usual. He kisses her and pulls her into a moment that feels like the past. For a short time, Eve feels hope that things might change between them. Afterward, they lie together, and everything feels calm. Then Nate brings up Addie. Eve explains what happened with the test, but Nate quickly defends her. He says Addie made a mistake and should not be punished too harshly. He speaks with strong emotion, asking Eve to handle it quietly instead of reporting it. Eve feels herself giving in, partly because of his words and partly because of the closeness they just shared. She agrees to keep it between them. After Nate leaves the room, Eve checks her phone and sees a message from Jay. Even after the moment with her husband, she still feels drawn to the other life she has been living. She answers him, unsure of what she truly wants. Meanwhile, Addie reaches a breaking point. Later that day, she rides her bike to Kenzie's house and parks a short distance away. She walks up to the large home and makes sure no one is around. Then she goes to the back door and takes out the keys she stole. After a moment of hesitation, she unlocks the door and steps inside. The house is quiet and large, filled with expensive things. Addie removes her shoes and walks carefully across the floor. She moves through the rooms, taking in everything, feeling the difference between this life and her own. Upstairs, she enters a bathroom and notices the clean space and even a heated toilet seat. She looks at herself in the mirror and thinks about how different she is from Kenzie. She continues through the house until she finds Kenzie's room. Inside, everything looks perfect. On the desk, she finds a note written by Hudson. The words bring back memories of their past and everything they lost. The pain mixes with anger, and she picks up a small object and throws it to the floor, watching it break. Addie walks into the closet and looks at the rows of clothes. She reaches out and takes a soft pink top, telling herself it does not matter. As she stands there, surrounded by everything that feels out of reach, a sudden loud crash echoes from downstairs. Addie stands frozen in Kenzie's room as fear rushes through her body. The loud crash from downstairs makes everything feel real. This is no longer just school trouble. This is something much bigger. Her plan for revenge feels empty now. All she has done is break a small object and step into a life that is not hers. The risk suddenly feels too heavy. She thinks about hiding, but the thought of being found there makes her feel sick. She knows she has to leave. She throws the stolen keys deep into the closet and slowly steps out. Her heart beats hard and fast as she moves down the stairs. She stops again and again to listen. The house is silent, but the sound still echoes in her mind. When she reaches the kitchen, she sees the truth. A white cat stands near a broken pitcher on the floor. The animal looks calm, as if nothing is wrong. Relief floods through her. No one is home. It was only the cat. She grabs her shoes, slips outside, and closes the door quietly behind her. She does not look back. She leaves everything behind and runs, promising herself she will never return. The next day, Addie walks into class feeling weak and tense. When Eve calls her to the desk, she expects everything to fall apart. Instead, Eve tells her she will not report the cheating. The words feel unreal. Addie feels the weight lift from her chest, but the warning remains. She will get a 0, and she must improve. Eve hands her a list of tutors and makes it clear there will be no second chance. Addie thanks her with shaking hands, holding on to this one moment of mercy. At the reflections meeting, Nate reads her poem and speaks about it with care. His words feel different from everyone else's. When the others leave, he asks her to stay. The room becomes quiet, and something shifts between them. He tells her he spoke to Eve for her, that he made sure she would not be reported. The meaning of that settles deep inside her. She feels chosen. Important. Without thinking, she steps forward and hugs him. He holds her, and the moment stretches longer than it should. When they pull apart, the air feels heavier. He speaks about how he feels, how she has changed something inside him, how she brought life back into a place that had gone quiet. His words build around her like something strong and close. The darkroom becomes their space. It smells sharp and cold, filled with chemicals and still air, but the feeling between them is the opposite. It is warm and close and hard to step away from. Nate speaks softly, his voice steady, saying she is the one who brought meaning back to him. He calls her the reason he can feel again, the answer to something missing. Addie feels it clearly then. Not fear, not doubt, something else. A strange sense of power. She is not just a student anymore. She is the one who gives him something he cannot find at home. The thought stays with her, growing stronger as the distance between them fades. The moment builds slowly. It is not sudden. It rises, step by step, like something they both already know will happen. The cold metal of the table presses against her, but the air between them feels warm, almost too warm. His words come again, soft and steady, like a rhythm. He speaks of her, of life, of beauty, of the way she changed everything. The words settle into her mind. As the moment reaches its peak, Addie holds onto those words. She repeats them quietly in her head, like a line of poetry that keeps her steady. The cherry-red lips, the feeling of being seen, the idea that this is something rare and meant to be. It becomes her anchor as everything shifts. It feels like a surrender to something that cannot be stopped. A line is crossed, and the air in the room changes. The silence after feels heavier, like the weight of a secret that cannot be undone. After that, nothing between them is the same. At home, Eve sits with her work when Nate arrives. His energy is different now, strong and sudden. He pulls her close, trying to create something that feels real again. But the moment does not hold. Eve pulls away, saying she has plans and cannot stay. Nate reacts with anger and leaves, the space between them growing wider again. Back at school, Addie finds it harder to focus on anything else. Their connection becomes hidden and controlled. No more looks, no more small signs in class. Only quiet messages that disappear, and stolen time in the darkroom. Each moment feels intense, but also fragile. Then comes the announcement. The winner of the Poetry Award is named. Addie listens, sure it will be her. But the name called is Mary Pickering. Lotus. The shock hits hard. Nate had told her something else. Later, when they meet, he explains. He says he had to change his decision to protect them. He says he could not risk drawing attention. Addie listens, her anger fading as she holds on to what they have. She chooses to believe him. As they part, a new thought settles in her mind. A future where they do not have to hide. A future where nothing stands in their way. And slowly, that thought shapes into something darker. That future would be easier if Mrs. Bennett were no longer there. Addie sits alone in the cafeteria, trying to eat in peace, but that never lasts for long. Kenzie walks past her table and casually pushes the tray toward the edge. The food slides off and crashes onto the floor. The sound draws attention, and laughter follows. Kenzie gives a fake apology while her friends laugh behind her. Addie kneels down and tries to gather what she can, knowing it is pointless. Her thoughts drift to the folded paper in her notebook, the poem Nathaniel wrote for her. She has read it so many times that she knows every word. It is the one thing that makes the day feel bearable. Kenzie grabs the paper before Addie can stop her. Panic hits instantly, but Addie manages to snatch it back and claims it is something she copied from a book. Kenzie loses interest and walks away. Addie checks the page and sees a stain on the corner, but the words are still there. She tells herself that the paper does not matter because she already carries the poem in her mind. When she goes back to get food, she finds she does not have enough money. The lunch worker refuses to help. Just as she feels close to breaking down, Hudson steps in and pays the difference. He tells her she needs to eat. Addie feels a mix of gratitude and pain, remembering how things used to be. She warns him not to tell Kenzie, and he agrees. In class, she tries to eat quickly before the bell, but Eve stops her. Eve refuses to allow food, even after Addie explains she missed lunch. Addie puts the sandwich away, her hunger turning into anger. She thinks about everything Nathaniel has told her, about how Eve treats him and how unhappy he is at home. Sitting there, she feels a growing hatred toward Eve, believing she is the reason he is trapped in a life he does not want. That evening, Eve hosts dinner with Shelby and her husband. The night feels long and uncomfortable. She watches the way Shelby's husband treats her with ease and warmth, and the difference between that and her own marriage becomes clear. Nate shows little interest in her, and the distance between them feels stronger than ever. When the guests finally leave, Eve steps outside to take the trash to the curb. The quiet street should feel calm, but instead something feels wrong. A sound comes from the bushes, and fear rises quickly. She looks around and sees a figure moving in the shadows. Eve runs back toward the house, her heart racing. Just before she closes the door, she catches a clear look at the face in the yard. It is Addie. The sight stays with her as she locks herself inside. Later, she tells Nate what she saw, but he does not take it seriously at first. When she insists, he begins to listen, but his concern seems misplaced. Eve says she will go to the principal in the morning. Nate argues against it, saying it is too extreme. Instead of continuing the argument, he moves closer to her and begins to calm her down in a different way. His tone softens, and his actions shift the moment away from the problem. Eve feels herself giving in, even though something about it feels wrong. The next day, Addie is called to the principal's office. Eve is already there, angry and certain of what she saw. Addie sits down and keeps her expression blank. She denies everything. She says she was home all night and never went near the house. Eve pushes back, but without proof, the principal cannot act. Addie holds her ground and does not change her story. Slowly, the situation slips away from Eve. Addie leaves the office feeling shaken but also relieved. She knows she would not have stayed calm without the warning she received. Later, Addie meets Lotus in the cafeteria. Lotus tries to explain what really happened with the poetry contest. She says she did not go to the principal and that Nate made the decision himself. Addie refuses to believe her. She trusts Nate completely and sees Lotus as someone trying to take something away from her. She walks away, choosing his version of the truth without hesitation. Still needing reassurance, Addie goes to Nate's classroom during a free period. He reacts with anger at first, warning her that she is taking risks that could expose them. His words are sharp, and she begins to cry. Then his tone changes. He comforts her, telling her she means everything to him and that they must be careful. He says they cannot meet for a while. The thought hurts her deeply, but she accepts it because she believes in what they have. At the same time, Eve cannot let go of what she saw. Her thoughts return to the warning she once heard about Addie. She begins to consider a different possibility. Maybe Addie is not focused on her. Maybe she is focused on Nate. The idea pushes Eve into action. She walks quickly through the halls toward his classroom, her mind racing. When she reaches the door, she looks through the window. Inside, Nate and Addie are standing close together. At first, it seems like a simple moment, but then it changes. Nate reaches for her, and the distance between them disappears. The truth becomes clear in an instant. This is not confusion or misunderstanding. It is something real and hidden. Eve steps back, her breath caught in her chest. The shock turns into something colder. Instead of opening the door, she takes out her phone and captures the moment. The image is enough. It holds everything she needs to know. She returns to her classroom in silence. The students sit waiting, but she cannot focus on them. She gives them work to keep them busy and sits at her desk. Her mind moves quickly, shifting from shock to decision. She takes out her phone and sends a message to Jay, telling him she needs to see him that night. As she watches the class in front of her, everything feels different. The truth is no longer hidden. What comes next will change everything. After leaving the school, Eve meets Jay in a quiet parking lot near his store. They arrive separately and then drive off together to avoid attention. Normally, the secrecy would bring a sense of excitement, but Eve feels none of that now. Her mind is filled with the image she cannot erase, the moment she saw Nathaniel with Addie. When Jay asks what is wrong, she tries to speak, but the words do not come. Instead, she breaks down and begins to cry. Jay pulls the car over in a quiet area and holds her as she struggles to explain. When she finally tells him what she saw, his reaction is immediate and sharp. He becomes angry in a way she has not seen before, calling Nathaniel a terrible person and saying he should face consequences. Eve asks what she should do, unsure of how to move forward. Jay tells her clearly that she must leave him. He warns her that involving the school will only turn everything into a public scandal. Instead, he tells her to take control of the situation and walk away. Eve listens, and even though the idea feels overwhelming, she understands that he is right. For a moment, she imagines a different life, one where she is free from her marriage. When Eve returns home, she is no longer steady. She has been drinking, trying to quiet her thoughts, but it has only made everything heavier. She waits for Nathaniel, thinking about where he might be and what he might be doing. When he finally arrives, she sees him the same way she once did, calm and confident, but now that image feels false. She tells him they need to talk, and without hesitation, she tells him she knows about him and Addie. Nathaniel first tries to deny it, acting as if the idea is impossible. But when she tells him she saw them, his expression changes. He attempts to explain it as a mistake, something small that will not happen again. Eve does not accept this. She tells him what she saw was real. The conversation quickly turns serious as he asks if she has told anyone else. Eve says she has not, and he asks what he can do to keep it that way. She makes her demands clear. She wants a divorce, the house, and for him to end the relationship immediately. She also tells him he must leave his job. Nathaniel reacts strongly to the last demand, saying teaching is his life. He tries to turn the situation around, pointing out her drinking and her habits, but Eve does not move. Then she tells him about the photo. The moment he hears this, his confidence disappears. He realizes he no longer has control. With no other option, he agrees. He goes upstairs to pack, and Eve watches him with a calm that comes from knowing the truth has finally broken through. At the same time, Addie sits at home when she receives a message. The words are short and clear. Eve knows. The message is followed by another, telling her they cannot see each other anymore. The meaning hits her hard, and she feels everything around her begin to fall apart. She asks what will happen next, and Nathaniel explains that Eve has made demands. He says he must leave his job and end everything with Addie. The thought of losing him feels impossible to her. She believes in what they have, and she cannot accept that it could end this way. Then another message comes, one that stays in her mind. He says that if Eve were gone, everything could continue as before. The idea does not leave her. It stays with her, growing stronger as she thinks about it. Her mother leaves for work that night, and Addie is alone. The house feels quiet, but her thoughts are loud. She thinks about her father and the night he died. She remembers how everything changed after that, how life became easier in some ways. She tells herself that what happened then was an accident, something that could not be helped. But now, she begins to think about the present in a similar way. Addie tries to find another answer. She wonders if she can talk to Eve and explain everything. She believes that if Eve understands their connection, she might stop standing in their way. Holding on to that idea, she leaves the house and makes her way to Eve's home. At the same time, Eve sits alone, trying to calm herself after everything that has happened. The house feels too quiet, and she begins to think about what she needs to do next. Suddenly, a loud noise breaks the silence. She stands up quickly, her heart racing, and listens. Another sound follows, coming from the kitchen. She realizes someone is inside. Eve moves carefully toward the noise and enters the kitchen. There, she sees Addie. The girl looks surprised, as if she did not expect to be caught. For a moment, Eve feels something different from anger. She sees a frightened girl, someone who has been pulled into something she does not fully understand. Eve tries to stay calm and tells her that she knows about everything. Addie reacts immediately, saying that what she has with Nathaniel is real. Eve tries to explain that he has taken advantage of her, that he has said what she wanted to hear. But Addie refuses to listen. Her emotions rise quickly, and her voice becomes louder. The conversation turns tense as Eve suggests they speak to the principal so Addie can get help. The words push Addie too far. She feels trapped, as if everything is being taken away from her. In a sudden movement, she grabs a heavy pan from the counter. Before Eve can react, Addie swings it. The impact is strong and immediate. Eve falls to the floor, and everything goes silent. Addie stands there, breathing hard, trying to understand what has just happened. She looks at Eve and waits for any sign of movement, but there is none. Panic replaces the anger. She did not come here to do this. She only wanted things to change. With no one else to turn to, Addie reaches for Eve's phone. She lifts Eve's hand and uses it to unlock the screen. She finds Nathaniel's contact and calls him. When he answers, his voice is sharp at first, but it changes when she speaks. She tells him something has happened and asks him to come. There is a long pause on the line. Then he agrees. Nathaniel arrives at the house in less than 20 minutes. Addie is still on the kitchen floor, her knees pulled to her chest, unable to move. From where she sits, she can see Eve lying still, her feet turned at an angle that feels wrong. The silence in the room is heavy. When Nathaniel enters, his shirt is loose at the collar and his hair is messy. He looks at Addie, then at the body. Addie tells him what happened. She says she hit Eve because she was going to report them. Nathaniel listens, then kneels and checks for signs of life. He watches her chest, but it does not move. His face settles into a calm expression that does not match the moment. Instead of panic, he asks for Eve's phone. Addie hands it to him. He scrolls quickly and deletes the photos Eve had taken. The proof is gone. He begins to speak in a steady voice. He tells Addie they must act carefully. He explains a plan to make it look like Eve left town. He will use her phone to create a false trail, move her car, and make sure no one finds her. Addie listens, shaken by how easily he says it. When she hesitates, he reminds her the other option is prison. She nods, unable to argue. While Addie goes upstairs to get sheets, Eve wakes on the floor. Pain spreads through her head, and her vision blurs. Her fingers come away wet with blood when she touches her scalp. She sees Nathaniel standing over her with her phone. She asks for help, but he does not move. His face is cold. Her memory returns in pieces. She remembers Addie in the kitchen and the blow. She tells Nathaniel to call for help and report what happened. He refuses. He speaks about consequences and his life being ruined. Eve tries to sit up and insists they must do the right thing. Nathaniel kneels beside her, but not to help. His voice hardens. When she refuses to stay silent, his hands move to her neck. The pressure builds quickly. Eve tries to fight, but she is weak. Her hands press against him, but they cannot break his grip. Her breath fades, and her vision darkens. In that final moment, she understands his choice. Then everything goes still. When Addie returns, Nathaniel is standing again. Together, they wrap the body. Addie notices dark marks on Eve's neck, shaped like fingers. She asks about them, but Nathaniel dismisses it and says they were always there. His tone leaves no room for questions. Addie tries to accept it, though something feels wrong. They follow his plan. Nathaniel drives while Addie follows in Eve's car. The roads are empty and cold. Addie grips the wheel tightly. They leave the car at a station, then continue together. Nathaniel remains focused, already thinking ahead. They arrive at an old pumpkin patch. The ground is uneven, filled with rot and a heavy smell. Nathaniel carries the body while Addie brings the tools. He starts digging at once. The ground is hard at first, then softer beneath. Addie joins him, though every movement feels wrong. Time passes as they dig in silence. At one point, Nathaniel tells her to lie down in the hole so he can measure it. The request shocks her, and she refuses. His reaction is sharp. His voice lowers, and his stare feels different, almost dangerous. Fear rises in her chest. She asks again about the marks on Eve's neck, and his tone turns colder. For a moment, she wonders if he is hiding something. Then he pulls back and tells her she is imagining things. When the hole is ready, he says he forgot Eve's purse and needs to go back to the car. He tells Addie to keep working and reminds her to deny everything if anyone asks. Then he leaves. Time passes slowly. Addie waits and calls his name, but there is no answer. The silence grows heavier. She realizes he is not coming back. The thought settles with a cold weight. She is alone. With no choice, she finishes the burial herself. As she moves the body, a purse falls from the sheet. She stares at it. Nathaniel had said it was still in the car. The lie is clear. Still, she pushes the thought away and covers everything, hiding the grave as best as she can. She finds her way back to the road, her clothes covered in dirt and her hands shaking. The night feels endless. She checks her phone and sees no message. Panic builds as she realizes she cannot get home. Finally, she calls Hudson. At first, there is no answer. Then the phone rings back. Hudson sounds tired, but when she asks for help, he agrees. After a long wait, his car appears. Addie gets inside, and the warmth feels unreal. Hudson looks at her but does not ask much. They drive in silence. Addie wants to tell him everything, but she cannot. When he asks what happened, she only says she made mistakes. The rest of the drive is quiet. When they reach her house, Hudson tells her she can talk if she needs to. Addie nods but says nothing. Before leaving, she asks him to keep this night a secret. He agrees. Addie steps out of the car and walks toward her house, carrying the weight of everything in silence. The next morning, Nate wakes and reaches across the bed out of habit, expecting to feel Eve beside him. His hand meets only cold sheets. For a brief second, the absence feels strange, but then relief settles in. The problem that had threatened his life is gone. He lies there, thinking about how quickly everything changed. In one night, the danger disappeared, and the only person who could expose him is no longer alive. He tells himself he is safe. He gets out of bed and walks into the bathroom, already planning his day. When he pulls back the shower curtain, he freezes. Inside the tub sits a pair of Eve's red shoes. The sight is wrong. He knows she owned many pairs, but she would never leave them there. For a moment, he considers letting the water run over them, but instead he reaches in and takes them out. He tells himself she must have left them there before everything happened. He places them in the closet and forces the thought away. He turns on the shower and steps under the hot water, letting it run over his shoulders. The heat feels normal, steady, and controlled. It helps him think. He plans to go through his usual routine, to act as if nothing has changed. When he steps out, he decides that later he will report Eve missing. The idea feels necessary. It will explain her absence and guide the story in the right direction. At the same time, Addie lies awake in her bed, unable to rest. Every time she closes her eyes, she sees the image of Eve in the grave and the marks on her neck. When morning comes, she pretends to sleep as her mother checks on her. She cannot face her. After hours pass, she finally gets up and checks her phone. There is a message from Hudson asking if she is okay. She cannot answer. She opens her messages and looks for Nate. There is nothing. When she tries to send a message, the app shows an error. His account is gone. The realization makes her feel sick. She stares at the screen, trying to understand. She tells herself it is part of his plan, that he is removing any trace of what they had. But the silence feels like something else. It feels like he has left her behind. Downstairs, she tries to eat, but her hands shake as she waits for the toaster. The house is quiet, and her thoughts grow louder. She repeats his words in her mind, telling herself to deny everything. It is the only way forward. Later that day, Nate begins his performance. When Detective Sprague arrives, he opens the door in a calm and careful way. He invites her inside and speaks in a controlled tone. He explains that Eve left for a sudden trip, that she wanted to visit her parents. He describes the train ticket, the plan, and the last time he saw her. Every detail is placed with care. Sprague listens without reacting much. She tells him that Eve never boarded the train. Nate responds with shock, placing a hand over his mouth as if the news is overwhelming. He suggests something may have happened at the station. When she asks about his marriage, he speaks of it as stable and even mentions plans for the future. Then he shifts the focus. He brings up Addie. He describes her as troubled and says she had issues with Eve. He mentions seeing her near the house and produces a note with violent words written on it. The detective studies the paper closely. Nate explains it as something he found, something that worried him but did not seem serious at the time. He watches as the suspicion begins to move away from him. When Sprague asks to look around the house, he agrees, though his confidence weakens. As she walks through the rooms, his attention sharpens. When she enters the kitchen, she pauses. In the center of the floor sits a pair of blue shoes, covered in dirt. Nate feels a sudden drop in his stomach. He knows they were not there before. Sprague notices them and asks about them. Nate gives a short answer, trying to stay calm, but his thoughts begin to race. After she leaves, He locks the door and returns to the kitchen. The back door is slightly open, and a bird flutters inside, pecking at the shoes. He forces it out and looks closer. There is something caught in the heel. He leans down and sees it clearly. A piece of smashed pumpkin. The sight sends a wave of fear through him. He knows exactly where that came from. The ground at the burial site was filled with it. The connection is clear. Someone knows. He washes the shoes quickly, trying to erase the evidence, but the feeling does not leave. He tells himself that if someone had real proof, they would go to the police. This must be something else, something meant to unsettle him. Still, the thought remains. He is not as alone as he believed. At Addie's house, the pressure builds in a different way. Detective Sprague arrives and speaks with her and her mother. Addie keeps her voice steady and denies everything. When the note is shown, she admits she wrote it but claims it was for an assignment. Her mother looks at her with growing fear. The questions continue. When the detective asks about the car in the garage, Addie's chest tightens. Her mother decides to test it. They go into the garage, and the smell of stale air fills the space. The engine starts without hesitation. The sound echoes loudly, removing any doubt. Her mother turns to her and asks what she has done. Addie denies it again, but the words feel thin. The truth sits between them, unspoken but present. She knows she cannot admit anything. If Nate is denying everything, she must do the same. That night, Nate prepares for bed, trying to return to a normal routine. The call from Sprague confirms that the investigation is moving forward, just as he expected. He feels a sense of control again. But as he settles in, the doorbell rings. He walks downstairs and opens the door to find a package waiting outside. He brings it in and opens it without much thought. Inside is a pair of bright red shoes. At first, he assumes Eve ordered them. Then he looks closer. The soles are covered in fresh dirt. Fear rises instantly. He drops the shoes and rushes back to the door, opening it wide and looking into the darkness. He calls out, but no one answers. The night remains silent. Slowly, he closes the door and leans against it, his breath uneven. The logic he relied on begins to crack. Someone knows what happened, and they are close enough to reach him. Nate does not sleep. The night drags on with broken rest and sharp dreams that feel too real. In them, Eve rises from the ground, her body stiff, her red heels striking the dirt as she moves toward him. He wakes again and again, unable to escape the image. By morning, his body feels drained. His hair is unwashed, his clothes loose, and his face shows real exhaustion instead of the careful act he used before. When Detective Sprague arrives, he lets her in without preparing himself. She studies him closely and notices the difference. Her tone is calm, but there is a harder edge beneath it. She tells him she spoke with the school principal and learned that Addie was both Eve's student and his own. Nate feels a sharp tension in his chest. He knows he should have said that earlier. He tries to minimize it, calling Addie an average student, nothing more. Sprague does not seem convinced. She asks if there was anything inappropriate between them. Nate denies it quickly, almost too quickly. When she asks about his marriage, he hesitates, then answers in a controlled way. He even wonders aloud if Eve might have had someone else in her life, someone who could be behind what is happening. He blames his confusion on lack of sleep, but the damage is done. Sprague watches him with growing suspicion. After she leaves, the house feels worse than before. The silence presses in. Nate tells himself she has no proof, but he can see that she is getting closer. The sense of control he relied on begins to weaken. At the same time, Addie walks alone in the rain. The cold water soaks her clothes, but she keeps moving. Being outside feels easier than staying in the house with her mother's constant watch. When a black car slows beside her, fear rises immediately. It is Sprague. The detective steps out and speaks directly, without anger but with urgency. She asks about Nate and about what was happening between them. Addie denies everything, repeating what she has told herself. Sprague listens, then tells her something that breaks through the denial. Nate is blaming her. He is telling the police that she followed Eve and acted alone. The words shake her. She tries to reject them, telling herself Nate would never do that. Sprague gives her a card with a number and tells her to call if she wants help. When the car drives away, Addie stands in the rain, holding the card, unable to move. At home, her mother questions her again. Addie gives simple answers and avoids the truth. The tension between them grows heavier. Her mother asks directly if she knows anything about Eve. For a moment, Addie almost speaks. But she stops herself and repeats her denial. The doorbell rings. Addie expects the police, but when she opens the door, she sees Kenzie. The sight shocks her. Kenzie looks different, soaked from the rain, her face tired and serious. Something in her expression makes Addie step aside and let her in. They sit across from each other in silence. Kenzie begins with an apology, admitting she treated Addie badly. Then she says she knows about Nate. Addie tries to deny it, but Kenzie starts repeating lines from the poem Nate gave her. The words are exact. Addie feels everything shift. She insists the poem was written for her, but Kenzie shakes her head. She explains that their relationship began years ago, when she was much younger. She describes how Nate made her feel special, using the same words, the same promises, the same idea of a deep connection. The truth settles slowly but completely. What felt unique now feels reused and empty. Addie listens as Kenzie explains how long it lasted and how she finally understood she had been used. The anger that once drove Kenzie is gone, replaced by something more honest. Kenzie says she wants to go to the police. She wants to stop Nate before he harms anyone else. At first, Addie hesitates. But when Kenzie shows her messages with the same words Nate used, the last doubt disappears. The connection Addie believed in is gone. Addie reaches into her pocket and pulls out the card Sprague gave her. She looks at it, then at Kenzie, and agrees. At the station, the room feels small and tense. Kenzie struggles to speak, her confidence gone. Addie sees how young she looks and understands the truth she avoided. Nate was never what he claimed to be. When Sprague enters, Addie speaks first. She tells everything. She describes the relationship, the secrecy, and the night Eve was hurt. The words come steadily. She does not stop, even when it becomes difficult. She knows silence is no longer an option. At the same time, Nate drives through the rain, unable to stay inside his house. The pressure has become too much. When he returns through the garage, his phone rings. It is Sprague. Her tone is colder now. She tells him officers came to his house and did not find him. He gives a simple excuse, saying he needed air. She tells him a car is being sent to bring him in. When he asks if he is under arrest, she answers in a way that offers no comfort. Not yet. After the call ends, the fear settles fully. He goes into the kitchen for water, trying to steady himself. Then he sees it. In the center of the floor sits a rotting jack-o'-lantern, its shape collapsed and twisted. Before he can react, it moves. A black bird bursts out and flaps across the room before settling nearby. The scene feels unreal, like something pulled from a story, but now it is meant for him. Nate steps back, his breath uneven. The pressure is no longer distant. Someone knows, and it is closing in. In that moment, he understands one thing clearly. He cannot stay in this house any longer. Nate drives fast through the rain, his hands tight on the wheel as fear pushes him forward. He knows he was told to stay home, but that no longer matters. If he goes to the police, he believes he will never leave again. The thought of being trapped feels worse than anything else. One idea fills his mind. He must return to the pumpkin patch. He must see the grave with his own eyes. If the body is still there, then everything can still make sense. If not, then something is very wrong. The road becomes harder as the rain grows heavier. His car slips on the wet surface, and for a moment he loses control before steadying himself. He keeps driving, ignoring the calls on his phone. When the road ends, he steps out into the mud and continues on foot. Each step sinks deep, slowing him down, but he forces himself forward. The air is cold, and his breath grows heavy as he reaches the patch. The place looks the same, filled with rotting pumpkins and broken shapes. He walks toward the grave, expecting to see the ground covered. Instead, he stops. The hole is open. He moves closer and looks inside. There is no body. No sheet. Nothing. The space is empty. The sight breaks his sense of control. He drops to his knees, staring into the hole as the rain falls around him. He knows what he saw that night. He knows she was gone. Yet now there is nothing. His thoughts begin to fall apart. He whispers her name, but there is no answer. Before he can react, something strikes the back of his head. The world fades to black. Eve remembers the darkness under the ground. She remembers the weight pressing down on her chest and the sound of dirt falling above her. She knew she could not move. If she showed any sign of life, she would not survive. So she stayed still, forcing her breathing to stay slow and quiet. She waited until the sounds above her were gone. When the silence came, she began to move. Every motion hurt. The sheet wrapped around her body made it harder to push through the soil. For a moment, fear almost stopped her, but she forced herself to keep going. She pushed upward, clawing through the dirt until she broke through the surface. The cold air hit her at once. She stood there, shaking, surrounded by the smell of decay. When she found her purse caught in the sheet, she felt a small sense of relief. Her phone still worked. She began walking, searching for a signal, knowing she could not return home yet. When she reached the road, she made a choice. She did not call the police. She called Jay. She needed someone she could trust, someone who would understand what had to be done. Jay arrived before sunrise and took her somewhere safe. In the quiet of a small shed behind his home, she told him everything. Her voice was steady, even as she described what had happened. Jay listened without interrupting. When she finished, he agreed to help her. Together, they planned what would come next. They used small details, familiar signs, and careful steps to draw Nate back to the place where everything began. Now, as Nate wakes, the cold mud presses against him. His hands and feet are bound, and the ground beneath him feels wet and unstable. He opens his eyes and sees Eve standing above him. For a moment, he cannot understand what he is seeing. Then the truth settles in. He begins to speak quickly, offering excuses and saying he made a mistake. He claims he came back to help her. Eve does not react to his words. She looks down at him with calm certainty. She tells him she knows why he came. He wanted to make sure she was dead. She reminds him of the choices he made and the lies he told. His voice grows louder as he tries to defend himself. He promises anything if she will let him go. Jay steps closer, silent and steady. Nate tries to move, but he cannot. The hole begins to fill slowly with water and mud as the rain continues. He struggles to keep his head above it. Eve picks up a shovel. Her movement is slow and controlled. She throws the first load of dirt into the hole. Nate reacts immediately, panic rising in his voice. He begs her to stop. He begs her to listen. She does not stop. Each movement is steady. Each sound of dirt falling grows heavier. Nate's words shift from pleading to anger, then back to fear. He says he loves her. He says he will change. None of it matters. Jay joins her, his movements just as firm. Together, they continue. The mud grows thicker as it falls. Nate's voice weakens as the weight builds around him. The fear he once spoke about, the fear of the endless dark, becomes real. Eve watches as the space closes. She remembers the words he once used, the same words he gave to others, the same promises repeated again and again. Now they mean nothing. The ground rises until there is no sound left from below. They finish the work in silence. The surface becomes flat again, as if nothing had ever been there. Months later, life begins to settle. Nate is listed as missing, believed to have fled. The case slowly fades without clear answers. Eve leaves her job and moves away, giving a simple story that no one questions too closely. Addie begins to rebuild her life. She returns to school and finds a quiet sense of stability. Hudson stays close to her, steady and supportive. Their bond grows stronger over time. They spend their days in simple ways, talking, walking, and slowly moving forward. Addie no longer feels alone. She does not know everything that happened, but she no longer needs to. As they reach a small diner, Hudson's phone lights up in his hand. He reads the message and a quiet smile forms on his face. Addie notices and asks if it is from a girlfriend. Hudson looks a little embarrassed and rubs the scar on his forehead before answering. He tells her it is from someone he used to know, a regular at the shoe store who always cared a lot about shoes. He explains that she had been through a very hard and messy time, but now she is doing better and has found some peace. Addie listens and gets the feeling that this person once meant a lot to him, but she does not ask anything more. They walk forward together, their hands finding each other without effort. Inside the diner, the lights are warm and the world feels calm for the first time in a long while. Addie lets herself relax and decides she will get a milkshake. It feels like a small choice, but to her it means something more. It feels like she has finally earned a quiet moment of happiness.